Good morning. My name is Steve Cassano. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Coalition for Justice and Education Funding. Today is a big day for us. Today, we're going to have a briefing, this morning in fact, on our oral arguments before the Supreme Court tomorrow morning. CCJEF has been involved in a lawsuit involving education funding, asking that all children have a right to a suitable education. The courts have differed, and now we're appealing before the Supreme Court. We have today with us three people that will speak and give a briefing as to the approach to the oral arguments tomorrow. First of all, I want to introduce to my left Judge Simon Bernstein, who wrote the language for the Constitutional Convention 40 years ago, so guaranteeing that all children had a right to a suitable and a quality education. And behind me are several students from the Yale Law Clinic. Two of those students, Brian Savage and Ronnie Newman, will speak today to give you a briefing as to our approach tomorrow with the oral arguments. I will first turn it over to Brian Savage from Yale Law School. He'll be followed by the Honorable Judge Simon Bernstein, and then by Ronnie Newman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, and go to it.
Thank you, Steve. We are here today to discuss CCJEF v. Rel, the landmark education case about which the Supreme Court of Connecticut will hear oral arguments at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. On November 22, 2005, 15 students and their families from across the state, joined by the Connecticut Coalition for Justice and Education Funding, brought an action in Hartford Superior Court challenging the constitutionality of the state's education system. These plaintiffs, who are represented pro bono by Yale Law School's Education Adequacy Clinic, allege that the state is violating the Connecticut Constitution by failing to provide its children with an adequate education that prepares them to be productive citizens. The suit is now before the Connecticut Supreme Court, which granted a rare expedited appeal to consider whether the Hartford Superior Court judge assigned to the case prematurely and incorrectly ruled that the children of this state have no right to an adequate education under the Connecticut Constitution. Tomorrow, two law students from the Yale Education Clinic, third-year law student Neil Weir and second-year student David Noah, will face the Associate Attorney General in oral arguments before the Supreme Court. As a second-year law student at Yale and a member of the Education Adequacy Clinic myself, I would like to make a few remarks about why we think tomorrow's arguments have the potential to be historic. As many of you know, the Connecticut Constitution guarantees to each child the fundamental right to education. Over 30 years ago, in the case of Horton v. Meskel, the Supreme Court of Connecticut established that this constitutional right requires that all Connecticut children receive substantially equal educational opportunities. In this case, we have raised a distinct but equally important fundamental question about the constitutional right to education. Do Connecticut children have the right to an education of a particular depth and quality? Do they have the right to an adequate education that prepares them to be productive members of society? It is sad but true that in many parts of this state, children are denied the education they need to pursue higher education or vocational training, to secure meaningful employment in an increasingly competitive global marketplace, and to participate fully in the civic and political lives of their communities. Yet despite this reality, the state has taken the unfortunate and shocking legal position that the education it provides does not have to be adequate. Although perhaps the state's position on this question should not be terribly surprising. By arguing that our children do not deserve even an adequate education, the state has been able to prolong this case and to prevent us from demonstrating at trial the poor condition of many Connecticut schools. In fact, this lawsuit has been delayed time and again by a series of motions filed by the state. And 2.5 years after the lawsuit was filed, we still have yet to reach trial. We've yet to have an opportunity to demonstrate the serious problems that exist in many Connecticut schools. The state's position seems to be that there is no need for our children to be guaranteed an adequate education because the right to substantially equal educational opportunities is enough. But while equality is certainly important, if there is no actual substance to the right to education as the state seems to believe, then the state could meet its constitutional obligations by herding all Connecticut school children into empty public buildings, so long as these buildings are free and so long as they are labeled schools. Surely the right to education must mean something more. We believe that it does, and we are asking the Supreme Court to define just what it means to have a right to education. We are confident that the Supreme Court will agree with the basic and fundamental principle that such a right must guarantee to the children of this state an education of a particular depth and quality. In fact, 18 other states, including neighbors like New York and Massachusetts, have recognized as much, and no state Supreme Court to consider the question has ever ruled otherwise. And the significance of this question cannot be overstated, especially in Connecticut. Connecticut's current education system and its fiscal infrastructure are broken. The achievement gap in Connecticut is the worst in the nation, and the State Department of Education is either unwilling or unable to play any significant role in the oversight and improvement of struggling districts. Should the Supreme Court decide that the children of this state do not deserve even an adequate education, it will be all too easy for state policymakers to justify their current practice of allocating drastically insufficient resources to address these problems. Yet both for the well-being of our children and the continued growth and prosperity of our economy, we simply cannot afford to continue inadequately funding our public schools. Only by strengthening our schools and investing in our youth can we possibly maintain Connecticut's competitive edge in the global economy and sustain the healthy communities in which we live. We have been pleased that a number of organizations and individuals from across the state have filed amicus briefs in this case, supporting our position that all Connecticut children do deserve the right to an adequate education. And at this time, I would like to introduce one of these individuals to talk a bit more about the meaning of this right in this state. Judge Simon Bernstein was a Bloomfield Town judge, circuit court judge, and then a Superior Court judge when the courts were organized into a statewide system. He also served as Deputy Secretary of State under Governor Ella T. Grasso. Most significantly for purposes of this lawsuit, Mr. Bernstein served as a delegate to the Connecticut Constitutional Convention of 1965, and he was the principal proponent and drafter of the Education Clause of the Connecticut Constitution. What better person to speak about the meaning of the constitutional right to education? Thank you for being here, Judge Bernstein.